Yo, what's up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was son of the great Ouranos, part 1. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. You traitor. The deafening roar could be heard throughout the palace. Kronos, the lord of the time, clutched his arm, in which 3 arrows were embedded. Golden blood flowed freely from the wound. The Titan Lord fixed with rage the figure emerging from the shadows. A man, an extremely tall and athletic man with a bow in his left hand appeared. The man had golden blonde hair with 2 horn-like locks, tanned skin, strange whiskers like marks on his cheeks, and ice blue cat-like eyes. The man wore a full-body black cloth under a thick coat, which seemed to be made of furs. 2 antlers were hanging on the hood of the mantle. His right arm was armored, and he wore black boots wrapped in white bandage. His locks were restrained from falling on his face thanks to a black headband. This man was the one once known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. This man was the Titan of the forests and the wilderness, the one now known as our Silvos, the youngest Titan. Silvos eyed his father coldly. Traitor, you say? That's rich, coming from the one who betrayed his own father. I guess it runs in the family. He sneered, his glance as cold as ice. You filthy ungrateful trash, bellowed Kronos, ripping the arrows of his arm. How dare you? How dare you betray the ones you owe your life to? Your parents. Silvos' cold eyes steal parents. The only one I'll ever see as a parent is Mother Ray. Certainly not you. He then made his bow disappear and began to walk away. Your reign is over. Zeus and his brothers are coming for you as we are talking. I'll let them get the victory they want. You're not in the position to do anything anyway. You may be powerful, but you're a tyrant. You think you don't need the help of others, and that's what is going to doom you. Enjoy your fall, father. Kronos gripped his side. You will pay Silvos. I curse you. Never a woman will grant you an heir. No Titan, no goddess will bear an offspring of you. No mortal will ever have an infant of you. Your lineage will end with you. The youngest Titan stopped dead in tracks. For the tiniest moment, Kronos allowed himself a smirk. But it ended when his son turned his head, glaring at him with eyes cold enough to freeze the Mount Etna. You curse me? You think your curse will affect me? Fool. No curse, no prophecy ever stopped me. I will break yours, just wait. And with a flash, he was gone, leaving the Lord of Time to face his incoming defeat. Olympus, shortly after Kronos and the Titan's final defeat. In the brand new throne room, Zeus, newly appointed king of the sky, finished to announce the various punishments awaiting the defeated Titans. And finally, Atlas, Kronos' general, you are condemned to hold the sky on your shoulders. You will never be free until someone takes your place. Which of course, we will not allow. Have the convict some last words to share. Atlas struggled against his chains, foam literally dripping out of his mouth. I will be back. You cannot imprison the great Atlas so easily. My vengeance will be terrible. Bewildered. Atlas could have continued his rant if a providential rotten fruit hadn't found his way to his mouth. Oh, just shut up, Atlas. My ears are bleeding, grunted our Silvos. And with that, Briareos and his brothers took his fellow Titan away. Several people entered the throne room. Prometheus, Epimetheus, Hecate, Thanatos, Hypnos, Aeneas, Eris, and Thetis. Sylvia and his brethren awaited Zeus's judgment. The new king of the gods eyed each of the Titans, thought he glared slightly when his stare landed on the Titan of the wilderness. Because of your different actions in the war, we, the gods of Olympus, made decisions about the fate of each of you, began Zeus. Aeneas, Thetis, because of your neutrality during the war, the council granted you with full amnesty. You will be able to reach your palace in peace. Thetis seemed relieved. Aeneas was perfectly neutral in expression. Prometheus and Epimetheus, because of your active help during the war, you will be granted the responsibility to recreate the human race. Hypnos, Hecate, Thanatos, Eris, you will be able to conserve your domains as gods. Each of them nodded. Finally, only our Silvos remained in the middle of the room. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Hera, and Demeter, the 6 godly children of Kronos and Rhea, eyed their Titan brother carefully. Zeus stood in his full giant form, though he was still smaller than ourselves by a good head. Brother Silvos said, the tone a tad hesitant. Your case is very complicated. While your role was decisive in the defeat of Kronos, we yet have to determine where your loyalty truly belongs, he announced. Our Silvos pinched the bridge of his nose. He has seen it coming miles away. I was born of Rhea and Kronos, yes. But that's not entirely true. My soul used to be mortal. Mother Rhea, on order of Kronos, gave birth to me, as a Titan, a kind of reincarnation, if you want. I am the Titan of the wilderness, and the Lord of the forests. I am free, and wish to remain as such. Like Aeneas, I have strictly no interest in such trivial things, as world domination, and this kind of matters. I only wish to take care of my domain, and stay away from the world. I am no threat to you, and I will never be. Silvos let his ice blue eyes fall on each of his godly siblings. My brothers and sisters, I swear, on the river Styx, and my honor, that I never had any ill intentions toward you. The ground shook, thunder boomed. Su sighed. Very well. Silvos, Titan of the wilderness and the forest, you are free of any suspicions, and free to go. The Titan nodded, and in a flash of light, transformed into a raven, and flew out of Olympus. Centuries later, in the depth of the Macedonian forests, Silvos grunted. He was sculpting a piece of wood when he accidentally cut himself. His golden blood dripped, one drop finding his way on a flower. The cut steamed, and disappeared in the following second. Silvos scowled. He really hated his solitude. Curse those Olympians' brats. You help them, you fight alongside them, and you ask them for the minimum recognition, but no. Bloody airhead, and his paranoia, he was worse than Kronos. During all his mortal life, he desired a family. And now that he had one, they rejected him out of fear, just because he was a Titan child of Kronos. At least not all of them treated him like an outcast. Namely Hades, Hestia, and Demeter. The others were wary of him. Demeter though was the only one to talk to him, and was actually friendly. She always was a nice girl. He sighed. He missed his friends. All his comrades who fought the god's tree. The ones he called family. Kakashi-sensei, Tsunade Ba-chan, Shizune-chan, Sakura, the Konoha 11, Hinata. The last name, especially, caused him to swallow hard. Hinata and he had begun dating a few weeks before the war, and their bond strengthened on the battlefield. He didn't blame himself for her death or others, because he perfectly knew that he couldn't do anything more. What could a mere mortal do against the reincarnation of Ouranos himself? Ever since Kurama wasn't there anymore to guide him, Silvos forced himself to keep cool more often than he would like to admit. And the lack of gratitude from his siblings didn't help either. He missed the company. He missed the pleasant warmth of Hinata. He missed them. He was alone. An unfamiliar light draws his attention. He turned, and to his surprise, the flower on which his blood dropped earlier was glowing, and growing. Moments later, the flower ceased glowing. Now, it looked like a giant fruit of sorts. Curious, he picked up the fruit, examining it. It was a little heavy. Of course, that was nothing for him, but the weight was certainly abnormal for a fruit. Using his heightened senses, he tried to sense what was into it. And there was the shock of his immortal life. There was a life developing in the fruit. The surprise was such that he almost dropped the fruit. What was the meaning of this? Not sure what to do, he sat, and just waited. The life inside the fruit was still growing, and fast. Patiently, he waited till life stopped expanding. And then, the fruit shuddered. Silvos frowned. It felt like life was struggling to escape, it felt wrong. He had to help that little life. He had to. Slowly, he used his dagger to open the fruit. Gently, he spread it open, and picked what was inside. In a wail, a nude baby girl came to his view. She was beautiful. White skin, a tuft of green hair on her head. The baby was crying her blue eyes out. Silvos immediately took her in his tent. He gave her a bath in a little wooden recipient, and then wrapped her in a fur pelt. And then fed her some milk that he luckily collected the last time he visited Helios cattle. The little one drank quietly, her tiny hand finding its way to Silvos' big hand. Well, compared to a baby's hands they were big. The Lord of Force smiled widely, still stunned by what was happening to him. In his hands was a child born by his blood. His child. His daughter. Kronos had cursed him. No woman could bear his children. But nothing stopped him from conceiving them by other means, his blood being one of them, it seems. The baby stopped drinking the milk. She eyed her father with her big round eyes. Hey there little one. Laughed the Titan softly. Who's a cute baby? The little girl squirmed and giggled. Silvos smiled. It felt nice. Really nice. A pleasant warmth. And then came the hard part. Now how am I going to call you? Surely, you want to have a name of your own, huh? Taking the baby's giggling, as a yes, the Titan thought for a moment. How about Naruto? The little girl's face twisted in a kind of disgust. That's not. Laughed at Silvos. Ramen. The baby gave her father a blank face. Okay, I get it. Laughed her father. How about Dricha? You like it, Dricha? His answer came in the form of a happy giggling. The Titan of the wilderness smiled. So, it's decided. Welcome to the world, Dricha, daughter of the forests. Happy baby's laughter could be heard throughout the forest. 6 years later. Daddy, look what I did. The little girl with unruly green hair and bright blue eyes was running in a clearing towards her father, her little hands clutched on a seed. Her father, a tall man with equally unruly blonde hair, smiled at her, and let his training sword rest on a tree. What is it, sweetie? He asked. Look, said the little dryad excitably. She focused, and suddenly, a magnificent flower emerged from the seed. That's incredible, my little flower. Laughed at Silvos, ruffling his daughter's hair, making her laugh. You really have a talent for that, Dricha. I'm proud of you. The young dryad smiled widely. The Titan loved his daughter's smile, it looked so much like his own. Daddy, when do you think I would be able to do like you? Asked the greenhead. You mean, this? Said Silvos, touching the soil with his hand. Instantaneously, tendrils of wood emerged from it, merged together, and formed an impressive-looking horse, entirely made of wood. "Yes, that," exclaimed the girl who had now stars in her eyes. The Titan chuckled. "Sorry my little leaf, but that will wait a few years, I'm afraid." The Dryad pouted. "That sucks." "Language, young lady, language," he playfully chastised. "Why don't you go looking for some berries? It's almost lunchtime." Dircha nodded and left for some bushes nearby. Arsilvos picked up his sword and resumed his training. It lasted several minutes before a strong amount of energy appeared in his range of senses. He turned to his daughter, who had obviously sensed it too, if her anxious face was anything to point. "Dircha, hide in a tree, quick." The Dryad quickly did as told and melted into a nearby tree. Arsilvos summoned his bow and arrows, ready to fire on the intruder to protect his child. He waited until he or she entered his field of vision. He wasn't expecting who walked in the clearing. "Demeter," he said, almost shocked. It had been several decades since he had seen his sister. Demeter smiled sadly. Something seemed to be wrong about the goddess of harvest. "Hello, brother. It had been a long time." Her voice was slightly broken, as if she cried a lot lately. Silvos dropped his bow. "You can come out of Dircha, there's nothing to fear." The little Dryad emerges from the tree and immediately hides behind her father. "Ah, don't be shy, little flower, say hello to your aunt," laughed the Titan. "Hello," muttered the girl shyly. She didn't come out of hiding. "Don't mind her, Demeter, she doesn't see many visitors," chuckled the Lord of Forests. "It's fine." The quiet reply came. "You have a beautiful daughter, Arsilvos," she said. The Titan frowned, as tears threatened to fall out of the goddess's eyes. "Demeter is something that matters?" he asked, concerned. Demeter nodded numbly. "Can we talk a bit, brother?" "Of course," said Arsilvos. "Dircha, go walk a little, I have important matters to discuss with your aunt, okay?" asked the Titan. Dircha nodded and ran in the bushes. Silvos smiled a little, and then noted the distant look on Demeter's eyes, while she eyed Dircha running. "Demeter, what is the matter? Has something happened?" Demeter sniffed, and then broke into tears. The pair of warm arms pulled her in a hug, as Arsilvos tried to comfort his crying sister. "Persephone, my Persephone, she's gone, Sylvia. She disappeared." Silvos frowned. "Why do you have the feeling of being involved in a bad headache-induced situation?" "Somewhere in the forest, near the city of Cadm." Arsilvos sighed heavily. It has been several decades now since Dircha quitted the nest. Things have been very entertaining, for the lack of a better term. The whole Persephone affair had been a hard one to deal with. It took the efforts of Hecate, Helios, and himself to find her in the underworld. Of course, the goddess of harvest tried to take back her daughter, but it was too late. Demeter may be Persephone's mother, but even he could see that Hades genuinely loved Persephone, and vice versa. Plus, Hades wasn't exactly poor or powerless, if you see what he meant. Okay, sure, the abduction part was uncommon, but the result was now one of the most faithful and lovely godly couple, in his opinion. It was quite the surprise when he discovered that Dircha was nearly as powerful as a minor goddess. Not exactly a goddess, but not too far. She was extraordinarily powerful, her control over the trees and plants unseen even amongst the oldest satyrs. Of course, the Titan ignored if that trait was common amongst his children, as Dircha was currently the only one. During the years he had thought of other ways to give birth. He hasn't exactly experimented, but he had seriously thought about it, and Dircha really wanted younger siblings. But deep inside, he was also worried. Zeus didn't take Dircha's existence very well. The idea of a powerful child of a Titan scared him, even though this child's father was his own brother. Arsilvos didn't understand his brother's paranoia. One thing was clear. He didn't inherit his brain from Mother Ray. His mother was another sore subject. Not long after Zeus married Hera, Zeus announced that all Titans, with the exception of Sylvia himself, were banned from Olympus. Again, his paranoia took the better of him, and without a regret, he banned his own mother. The little ingrate had even had the nerve to affirm that he did it in order to avoid any Titan attack. As if Mother Ray had any ill intention toward her children to begin with. For God's sake, she betrayed Kronos, and saved Zeus when he couldn't do anything but drool on her nipple. For crying out loud. She even helped him, the only Titan child she ever had, and planned with him the fall of the Lord of the Time. He tried to visit her, but it wasn't easy. She often changed locations, and knew very well how to hide. Rustle, rustle. Noises gained his attention. It came from a nearby tree. Deciding to investigate, he pecked a look into it only to discover a dying fox cub. The little thing was so young and small it couldn't be more than a handful of weeks. The cub had multiple lacerations on him, and was bleeding. Must have been attacked by an eagle. That saddened Arsilvos. He has always loved foxes. He took the dying animal in his hand and tried to heal him with his natural energy. But nothing seemed to work. And the cub was dying. Frowning, Arsilvos did the first thing passing through his head. He cut himself and let the golden blood flow on the cub. Soon light engulfed the cub, and his form shifted, becoming more human-like. And when the light died down, the cub in his arms disappeared, leaving the place to a baby girl with messy red hair, 2 cute fox ears, and a fluffy foxtail spreading off her tailbone. The baby opened her eyes, revealing black sclera and adorable grayish-blue eyes. The little one yipped and squirmed, trying to climb into the chest of our Silvos, who looked so happy that his smile couldn't get any wider. An animal, at least a dying one, could be saved by his blood. And by the look of it, he also became a father for the second time. Walking back to his camp, he noticed that something was wrong in the air. The sky was dark. The earth was shaken by a loud rumble. The rumble sounded like a distant cry of anger. Something was happening, and he didn't like it. Just as he prepared himself to look for some milk and clothing for his new daughter, a very familiar energy emerged near him. Hestia. Of all his godly siblings, Hestia had always been special to him, and it became even truer since she helped him raise Dritcha and gave her a natural resistance to fire. "Brother are Silvos," greeted Hestia. "I am here to who is that?" She pointed the baby in his arms. Silvos smiled, oblivious to the concerned face his sister had. "My new daughter, she was just born minutes ago. Isn't she cute?" Hestia's face softened a bit before regaining a panicking tone. "Brother, your daughter Dritcha is in great danger. Zeus is about to judge her for treason." Our Silvos blinked. "What?" The cold rage in his voice sent shivers down Hestia's spine. Prometheus, brother Prometheus, had defied Zeus. He gave the fire to the mortals. He used a plant he asked Dritcha to create. The poor dear ignored what Prometheus was up to. "She needs you, as a titan, and our brother, you can escape some of Zeus's laws, but..." Suddenly fissured, the wind roared, the animals howled. The whole forest was booming in anger. "Hestia, take my daughter for a moment, will you?" Our Silvos struggled to not howl, and to keep a calm voice in front of his child and his sister. Hestia nodded, and gently took the baby fox girl in her arms. Our Silvos began to walk away, when he turned and said, "While I am away, could you find her name?" "I'm not very good at it." Hestia smiled softly and nodded once more. Our Silvos disappeared in a flash. The baby squirmed and played with her aunt's hair, yipping and mewing, her fluffy tail waving happily. Hestia sighed. Her daddy was very angry, and she pitied Zeus right now. Our Silvos appeared just in front of the gates of Olympus. His eyes turned red and glowed, flames flickering around his sclera. His features began to become more feral. In an explosion of pure rage and godly energy, the Lord of the Forest blew the gates away. Zeus. Minutes ago, in the throne room, Dritcha, daughter of the Lord of the Forest, lay kneeling on the floor, chained and powerless. She had grown in beauty. Her once messy hair was tied in a high ponytail, and bangs framed the sides of face, but without hiding her pointed ears. Her eyes were the deepest ocean's blue, and her whole form was soft and well-proportioned. Number of satyrs, mortals, and even Zeus himself had tried to seduce her numerous times, but each time she managed to send them away. Her crime? Being used, unknown to her, by a titan in his plan to defy the Lord of the Sky, and being herself the daughter of a titan. Dritcha glared fiercely at Zeus. The heir had never trusted her father, or any titan for that matter. He was going to blame her for the hell of it, and it would not surprise her if he decided to do something against the mortals after that, despite the fact that they were perfectly innocent. "Dryad Dritcha, daughter of the titan Silvos, for your participation in Prometheus's treachery, you will be condemned to share his fate. You will be chained to the Caucasian mountains, and have your kidneys and matrices constantly devoured." Has the convict some last words to share? Bloated Zeus's voice. Dritcha spat. The bastard was more than happy to condemn the woman who dared to refuse his assaults. "Go to Tartarus," she cried, only to be backhanded by the Lord of the Sky. "Know your place, Dryad. Cyclops, take her away." And, as the one-eyed giants took her, she began to trash and shout, "Don't touch me. Leave me alone, leave me alone." She shut her eyes in despair and wailed, "Father." Everything happened in less than a second. The wind blew furiously, the palace shook, and a malicious presence made the minor deities flee in panic. Nature itself seemed to howl in anger. Zeus. The loud detonation was heard, and cracks began to form on the walls by the sheer pressure. By the time the Lord of the Forest arrived in the throne room, only the Olympians remained there. Even the Cyclops collapsed, unconscious, leaving Dritcha without restraint. Silvos was furious. Nah, scratch that, he was livid. He knew that Zeus didn't trust him, and could be unfair and cruel, but that crossed the line. He dared to hit his child. He walked straight at him, decided to violently bash some senses in his thick head. The King of the Sky, regaining his bearing after his initial shock, snarled and pointed his master bolt to our Silvos. "What are you doing on Olympus, Titan?" Silvos narrowed his blazing eyes. His anger was growing more and more. "You perfectly know why I am here, you miserable ungrateful worm of a brother," growled the Titan, "son of rare, release my daughter at once." This time, the tremor that shook the palace began to seriously worry the other gods. Demeter was the first to act. She created vines and roots to keep her Titan brother still. But her attempt fails, as the plant shrinks back, as if they are deadly afraid of him. Zeus began to shout even louder. How dare you order me? I am the king of Olympus, my authority is absolute. His brother laughed. Your authority? You are so arrogant that you actually think that you can easily order me around. His features became even more feral. I am the lord of the forest, the king of the wild. Every dryad, satyrs, wild animals, and life forms of the forest are my subjects, not yours. Zeus growled once more, but this time, Poseidon decided to step in. He is right, brother. The forest and its inhabitants are Silvo's domain. That dryad defied the authority of the gods of Olympus, she must be punished. Punished? For what exactly? Laughed at Salvos for being used, without her knowing. For being the daughter of your brother, who happens to be your eldest brother. At that point, Zeus's face was red from anger. But whispered Silvos in his brother's ear because she refused herself to you. Silence. Utter silence met that statement, except for the cracks of lightning emitted by Zeus's bolt. The king of Zeus was shaking in fury at this point. Face it, little brother. You have no power over my daughter. I am her king, and I am her father. Stated the lord of the forest in a chilling voice. I am the one who will judge her. Not you, Zeus. Zeus was about to say something, but Athena beat him on the stake. Actually, Sylvia has a point here, father. It's up to the lord of the Dryad's domain to judge her, it's the ancient law, and we are bound to obey it. Silvos allowed himself a smirk. Zeus. 0 or Silvos 1. Well, if everything is settled now, should I announce my daughter's sentence? He said with a mischievous grin, eyeing Dircha with a glance that said everything was gonna be alright. Well, I don't give shit about the whole matter, several gods deadpanned at that point. As the lord of the forest, I use my absolute authority, as a king, and a father and decide on your sentence. He said, as if without a care in the world, which began to really disturb the others' gods. Dircha, your punishment is immortality. You will attend to the forest by my side for eternity. Such is your punishment. Silvos said with a solemn tone of voice. A few hours later, back to Silvos' camp. Wahaha, you should have seen their faces, it was so priceless. Silvos laughed warmly. Hestia herself couldn't help but giggled. Behind them, Dircha was currently holding her newborn sister Vulpa on her lap. The little fox girl was squealing in laughter because of her big sister's tickles. So began Hestia, what do you plan to do now? Brother Zeus certainly wants your head now. It would be best if you stayed low profile for a while. In all honesty, I'm tired of being involved in godly affairs. I plan to give Dircha and Vulpa a happy life with a lot of siblings. I'll disappear for a century or two. Hestia smiled at her brother. You care so much about your family. And people wonder why I consider you my favorite brother. Silvos chuckled, making the best troll face he could. Is my favorite little sister making a move on me? He teased me. Hestia blushed and playfully punched his arm. Meanie? You know I don't mean it like that. Silvos laughed, of course. Another bunch of years later. Silvos wandered his domain, pride evident in his face. The forest was so healthy here. He could sense a lot of natural energy. Dryads and satyrs there and there. The dryads respected him, calling him their father. Many of them were his daughters, some were Dircha, the others worshipped him as their lord. The satyrs, however, were wary of him and tended to avoid him. Silvos guessed that it was because of his titan nature. Ulpa was another story. The lord of the forest soon discovered that his foxy daughter was in fact a brand new kind of monster. Her and her numerous daughters were the Cadmean foxes. Humanoid creatures with the physical appearance of young teenagers, able to turn into foxes the height of a lion. But fortunately for the demigods his siblings sired left and right, they were rather pacifists. Some of them liked to tend the camp built for the half-blood. Vulpa herself was a ball of fire. Excitable, goofy, and with a case of ADHD, far worse than a demigod. Thank God she wasn't dyslexic. Well, yes, Silvos was really proud of his kingdom. He was a king with a vast domain, a numerous descent, and tons of subjects. But he was a king without a queen. The curse of his father prevented him from having a child with a woman, that was true, but it wasn't the reason for his celibacy. He could make a woman pregnant using other means. Which was a drag, by the way cough, he just couldn't give birth to a demi-titan or god. No, he just wasn't able to find a woman he was worthy for. Though he had the feeling that it was about to change, one day. As he walked past the stream, he noticed a little figure wandering in the woods. Curious, he decided to check. Beauty. It was the only word that could describe the child. Her auburn hair, her fair skin, her silver eyes. She was wearing a cute little white chiton, and her hair was flowing freely on her shoulders. She was barefoot on the fresh grass. By the look of her frame, she must be something like 5 or 6 years old. The child was quietly humming to herself. Her whole being seemed to fly in the natural energy of the forest. Her energy was very familiar, it smelled a little like the sky. God Zeus really can't keep it in his pants. He felt bad for her, sometimes. He could actually pity her, she wasn't so unfair and monstrous toward Zeus's conquests and children. They were innocents, only Zeus should be blamed. The lord of the forest was about to continue his mental rant when... Who are you? I know you're here. Arsilvos startled in surprise. So, his theory was indeed true. The little one was a young goddess. Deciding to make his presence known, Arsilvos emerged from the shadows of the forest. The young Artemis eyed curiously the tall man emerging from the shadows of the forest. He was certainly taller than her own father. His blonde hair reminded her of the mane of a lion, his whiskers marked strengthening that effect, and his huge fur coat gave him an air of royalty. And his eyes were the eyes of a king. The man stopped in front of her, his gaze on her. "Who are you?" she asked again. The giant of a man seemed amused. "Isn't it polite to introduce yourself first, little one?" The child puffed her cheeks in annoyance. "I am Artemis. And I'm not little, I'm 2 years old," she exclaimed, putting her hands on her tiny hips, something Silvos found amusing and adorable at the same time. "The child, in my eyes, and the eyes of many others, a little one." He chuckled, much to her ire. "Well, little Artemis, do you know who I am?" he asked. Artemis shook her head. She had never seen that huge man before. "I am the king of the forest, my name is Sylvia. And I am your uncle, little one." Artemis's silvery eyes widened. "Are you a god, Mr. Silvos?" "Please, little one, call me uncle," laughed the titan. "I'll call you uncle when you stop calling me little one," she said with defiance. "And I'll stop calling you little one when you'll stop being one," he said, making the troll face. He laughed harder at her look of childish annoyance. "And to answer your question, I am a titan, not a god." Artemis then lost any look of annoyance on her face, instead gaining one of amazement and awe. "You're like my mother," she said, making the lord of the forest raise an eyebrow at her. "Who's your mother, niece?" "Leto." Arsilvos nodded. He knew Leto, and rather liked her, as a peaceful being. "But Mr. Sylvia," she asked, ignoring the amused look on her uncle's face. "How can you be a titan, and yet be my father's brother?" Arsilvos hummed to himself. "Do you like stories, little ones?" he asked. She nodded eagerly, and then sat in the grass, a look of excitement in her beautiful eyes. "By the gods, she's just like Drcha and Vulpa," mused the titan. Vulpa was just as easily excitable as her, and Drcha just as prideful, in this cute childish manner. Smiling, the lord of the forest sat. He began to recite his tale to his niece. It was a long time ago, long before the birth of the mighty Olympians. An arrow embedded itself in a target's bullseye, splitting in two another arrow that was previously there. Arsilvos whistled at his niece's display of skills. "Wow, Artie, with those kind of skills, I pity the one who will ever hit on you." Hedget. Twat 2 more arrows. Artemis's right eye was twitching. "I will never marry." Silvos eyed his niece with amusement. "So you have said for the past week." He chuckled. "If you continue on that path, you'll eventually become a lesbian." "What's a lesbian?" came the innocent question from an utterly confused and curious Artemis. Silvos failed dramatically when he finally realized what he had just said. "Phew, nothing," he said awkwardly, before trying rather lamely to change the subject. "Suo, what's up with the family?" The young goddess scowled. "Apollo is annoying. He always acts as if he was the big brother. He even patted my head. It's really infuriating, and each time I order him to stop, he just laughs and does it again." The little goddess stomped her foot in a cute manner in Arsilvos' opinion. "The titan lord of the forest. Artie, he is your brother. He is simply showing his affection to you." "I don't need that kind of affection," Artemis said stubbornly. Silvos ruffled her hair, much to her annoyance. "Artie, one day will come when your brother will be the only person for you, and that despite how dangerous or hopeless the situation can be. Trust me, your immediate family is one if not the most precious thing you can have." "Something our family doesn't understand, alas." Silvos frowned slightly. "The gods are at each other's throats, constantly quarreling, neglecting their domains of the mortals' well-being. Must one of their enemies rise, they will all be in danger." And by that he principally meant Zeus. But he didn't say anything of that kind. The little girl was too young by his standards to hold distrust against her father. She needed her paternal figure in her young life. The little girl eyed her uncle curiously. "What do you mean? Who would want to harm the gods?" Her question was genuine, and sometimes Arsilvos forgot that she was only 3 years old. "A lot of people, little moon. The less friendly titans, the monsters, and a lot of mortals, unfortunately," he added with a hint of sadness. "And it also includes many of the half-bloods and the demi-monsters." "What's a demi-monster?" asked the young goddess, unfamiliar with the term. A demi-monster is the child born from a human and a monster. Only a handful of monster species can breed with humans. Also, demi-monsters are much rarer than demigods. And unfortunately, they are often persecuted. Artemis hummed a little. She seemed to be thinking about what the Lord of the Wilderness had told her. "Arsilvos, why are the men so cruel?" she suddenly asked. Silvos raised an eyebrow. "You mean males or humans in general?" Artemis's distrust of males was well known to him. "In general," she muttered. Sylvan sat on the ground near a cliff. The view of the Macedonian forest was marvelous. Artemis soon imitated her uncle. Arsilvos took a good look at his niece. The young goddess had grown in beauty and talent over her time with the Lord of the Forest. She made friends with her cousins Dricha and Vulpa, playing with them and learning from them. She was quite skilled with a bow. Hell, she was even better than him at the same age. But the young goddess had yet to understand the responsibilities that will later be entrusted to her. Arsilvos signed Artemis, no human is born evil. Every baby human who comes to life is innocent. It's the influence of others and their own experiences that can change them, for the better or the worst. Even the gods and other immortals are responsible for a number of atrocities. But sometimes, you must accept the fact that you must do what should be done, even if it means using force. Did you ever felt anger towards humans? Asked his niece. Silvo's facial expression became as hard as stone. Artemis, in my long immortal existence, the number of mortals has been the subject of my ire. Each of them deserved this. But one day, my anger was so much that I ended up slaughtering an entire city. At that point Artemis's eyes widened. Her uncle was the most laid-back person she knew. She never viewed him as the type of person to destroy numerous humans, never in her wildest imagination. Arsilvos didn't miss it, and looked away. I think it would be better if I explained to you what happened that day, said the Titan in a somber tone. Beginning of the tale. Silvos recently wondered why the fates seemed to hate him. Couldn't he have just 1 minute of peace? Or was it humankind's hobby to destroy nature? Seriously, humans don't know their limits sometimes. Too many animals killed. Too many trees were destroyed. That city, in particular, was highly destructive. Scythia, a city that wasn't under the protection of any gods. A bunch of stupid atheists, who believed themselves to be the strongest city in Greece. Okay, they were powerful. But nothing compared to Athens or Sparta. Heck, their only resources were the gold, which could be found in a nearby river. He didn't even understand how in the name of heavens those insolent humans were ignored by the gods. What truly irritated him was that the inhabitants seemed particularly of nature and nature spirits. Numbers of his dryads were chased by humans with obvious bad intentions, but fortunately no normal human had the speed to catch a dryad. Silvos really hasn't the time to think about those stupid madmen. Truth to be told, the Titan had his hand full those last weeks. His Cadmean foxes were occupied tending to the cubs, born only 3 weeks earlier. One of them was his own, and the mother was currently guarding the den. A very fierce one, and a loving mother. The vixen had been very convincing in her choice of mate. He still remembered the day she literally tackled him. The Cadmean fox's heat period was truly frightening. Not that he complained, but even he was slightly exhausted in the end. The Titan of the wilderness stopped his musing when a sphinx nearly crashed nearby. The woman-lion hybrid seemed exhausted, and her face was twisted by panic and sorrow. Your Majesty must come quickly, she tried to say between breaths. Calm down, what's happening? Asked the Titan, checking for any injury on the sphinx, who was trying to stand. The cubs and humans attack choked the monster. Any colors left Arsilvo's face. No, the Lord of the Forest then dashed toward the location of the den. While running at inhuman speed, the smell of burn and death invaded his senses. No, they wouldn't dare, he frantically thought. Arriving at the clearing where the den was located, his fears were confirmed by the sight which welcomed him. Trees had been burned. Numerous dryads and lemures were trying to extinguish fire there and there. Animals such as wolves or boars were helped by digging the soil and sending sand and chunks of soil on the flames. But the next thing he saw shattered his heart. In the middle of the clearing were the foxes. And they were crying over the bodies of the cubs. The young animals' spirits had been killed and put in a pile, blood staining their fur. The mothers were crying and holding the bodies of their babies. Silvos slowly made his way toward them. His face denied any expression. What happened? He asked a dryad, his voice hollow of emotions. The dryad eyed her lord with sadness. Apparently, a human from Cythera discovered the existence of the den 2 days ago. It seems that those madmen believe that our presence near their city is a stain of evil that they must eradicate. They came in great numbers with weapons and fire. They began a fire to distract us, while the soldiers headed for the den. While some of them battled the fox charged with its protection, the others she was unable to continue. The look of devastation on her lord's face was hard to stand. Arsilvos waved his hand, making the fire to vanish. He eyed the dead kits, a terrible rage slowly boiling inside of him. The animals and nature spirits felt their lord's anger, and some of the youngest tried to comfort him. Lord Arsilvos. Lord Silvos. I found one, my lord. A voice came behind him. He turned to see a young panther werecat in full animal form that was carrying a whimpering kit by the back of her cloth. Her hood was down, revealing red hair with blonde streaks. Silvos' eyes widened. It was his kid. Kneeling, he gently picked up the kit, which stopped whimpering, and cuddled against her father, finally feeling safe. Silvos gently rocked his youngest until she fell asleep. And the mother? He asked. The werecat's ears flattened against its head. She is dead, my lord. A spear in the heart. She just had the time to hide the kid. Arsilvos nodded. Juna, come here, he called. The dryad approached. Yes, my lord, she asked. Silvos handed her the sleeping kid. Take care of her for me. he said simply. The dryad nodded. Silvos waited until she was far enough to not wake up his daughter. Barbros, he roared, his anger kicking full power. A lemur, bigger than the others, and looking quite old, immediately came by his side. He stood at 14, and had a strong constitution. His bark-like skin was a deep brown, and his body seemed as strong as an oak. On his face was a beard made of lichen. "Yes, my lord," he asked in a gruff voice. "Assemble the warriors. Call the packs. Make the forest shake and howl. Make them feel fear," he ordered, making his weapons appear. The lemur nodded and began to howl. Animal roars and war cries resonated throughout the forest. Soon, a loud rumble could be heard. Wolf packs erupted from the bushes, followed by panthers, lions, and bears. Monsters like griffin and sphinx joined them. Some of the Cadmean foxes shifted into their animal form, others took kukri knives and bows, and put leather armors on them. Lemurs came from every corner, making the ground shake under their feet. Werecats ran past them, some in their full animal form, some in their hybrid form, carrying weapons. The howling army headed to the south, Silvos at his head. His features were animalistic, and his eyes were blazing in anger. "Let's make them feel the wrath of the king." Meanwhile, the city of Scythia. Merivod, king of Scythia, was satisfied. Today was a good day. His soldiers had eradicated a den full of those disgusting creatures that dared to taint the forests around his city. Everywhere in the streets, his people feasted, and sang the death of the heirs of nature. The men of the proud city of Kogdare had proved again that they were above all those worthless creatures. Only one person didn't sing or feasted that night. Mavola, the king's daughter. Merivod had always hated the way his only daughter put herself lower than her righteous rank by worshipping those false gods. She was the princess of Scythia, the one destined to give birth to the future king. How dared she to lower herself like that? And there she was, in her room, muttering pitiful prayers to the false gods. Merivod didn't want any of this anymore. He walked toward the room, determined to beat those fake beliefs out of his daughter. In her room, Mavola prayed with all her soul for the forgiveness of the deities. She was a beautiful young woman. She just turned 17. Her pale blonde hair curled at the end, her skin was slightly tanned, and her eyes were the purest onyx black. She didn't wear any jewelry, and she wore a simple white chiton. Mavola prayed, tears pouring out of her eyes. She was sick. She was tired. She was sick and tired of that life. To her father, she was just a glorified piece of meat destined to be banged by the first half-decent male, deemed worthy to fuck her, and breed a king, a male worthy of respect and power, and not some weak female. And what was worse was that the princess knew that a sick monster of a father wouldn't be bothered at all to take her virginity himself. The very thought made her skin crawl. That city reeked corruption, sex, and crime. The sacred places were destroyed, young children were sold for the sick pleasure of inhuman beasts, women spat on the names of the goddesses, and men laughed at the might of the gods. Madmen, monsters, heretics, worthless primitive beasts, that was what the proud people of the mighty city of Kogdare really were. They disgusted her. They didn't respect anything. Not even their princess. How many times did she have to maim or even kill a man who tried to force her? Her own mother Medora died last year, killed by her drunken father. Kogdare was destined to disappear. And she had no place in such a city. She wanted to flee far, and to never go back. She wished somebody would hear her prayer. If only she knew that her life was about to change dramatically. The racket could be heard in the palace, and Mavola knew that her father was coming. When he entered, his bearded face was crimson, and his eyes were red-shot. He was obviously drunk. And the drunk Merivod was a dangerous and unpredictable Merivod. Mavola didn't have time to say anything, as her father backhanded her violently, and made her fall on the cold marble floor. "How dare you?" The king bellowed. "How dare you spoil the city of Kogdare by your filthy false believing?" Mavola spat blood, and tried to stand, but her father caught a handful of her hair. "For too long I endured your childish rebellious attitude. You are the princess of Kogdare. You are a woman, and you will act as such." Merivod thought that she was going to cry, and beg for forgiveness, as ever. But this time, Mavola did something she thought she would never be able to even dare thinking about. She spat on her father. Merivod howled in anger, and punched the insolent female in the guts. "That's it," he growled, ripping her chiton open, and using a piece of cloth to gag her. "No longer will you act as a spoiled girl." He pushed her daughter on her bed, and undid his buckle. "Tonight, you become a woman." Mavola's eyes widened in fear and horror. She watched, as her father opened her legs. 18 rated scene. You've been warned. That cannot be happening. She almost threw up, when her pig of a janitor began to grope her, and touch her most private parts. That cannot be happening. After what seemed an eternity of torture, Merivod stopped groping her. His erected meat stick came into view. Tears poured out of Mavola's eyes. She couldn't even cry when the pain of being violently penetrated hit her. That cannot be happening. Merivod took his time raping his daughter. He brutally made her on all four, and slammed her face onto the sheets, pressing her upper body on the bed, and upping her rear in the air. He forcibly restrained her by the neck, making the young girl cry even more. Finally, in a grunt, Marivot released himself inside her. He let go of her, removing the gag, and took great pleasure in her broken sobs. That will teach you to respect your males. Tomorrow you are to be exposed to all the city to see, and you will be sold to the best offering, he declared, exiting the room. Unknown to him, a certain immortal was watching him leaving. End of the 18-rated scene. Arsilvos couldn't remember the last time he was so disgusted. He just committed the sacrilege of raping his own flesh and blood, one of the worst crimes in his eyes. Right now, he blamed himself for not arriving in time to stop that from happening. The tight-eyed, the trembling form of the poor girl, staining her tight skin, sobbing in a heart-shattering manner. He approached her, and at the sound of his feet against the marble, covered herself in her sheets, sobbing harder. Please no more, she cried. The Lord of the Forest wanted nothing more but to extract the king's guts with his teeth. He should have arrived earlier. Mavola was a wreck. Her worst nightmare just had happened. And she couldn't do anything but watch, as the monster she called a father raped her. She hated him. She wanted him dead. She wanted him to suffer, to endure suffering worse than he inflicted onto her. And now he was about to do it again. She wanted him to die. May the gods curse him. Girl. Mavola froze. That wasn't her father's voice. She risked a peek from under the cover of her sheets. A man, a giant of a man, wearing a large fur coat and black clothes, was standing in front of her bed. His ice blue eyes were filled with sadness and sympathy. Who are you? She asked. Something in that man's aura seemed to calm her fear. The man asked, do you hate that man? Do you want to kill him? Mavola stared at the man. She felt strange. She felt like she has to answer him. He raped me, she mumbled. He took pleasure doing so. Tears of her rage leaked on her cheeks. He deserves to die, he has to suffer. I want to kill him so much. She breathed heavily. But I can't do it. Silvos raised an eyebrow. Why? Asked the oldest child of Ray. Mavola looked directly at his eyes. I do want to kill that pig for what he did to me. But it would only be to punish him for what he did to me. Her eyes flashed red. I want to see him hurt for every sin he committed. I want to see him squirm like the pathetic worm he is, make him pay for an entire life of crimes, heresy, and lucre. The gods will throw in Tartarus. She bites her lower lip, drawing blood. I am not a worthless killer, unlike him. Silvos eyed the human very carefully. She wasn't awarded it, but her scent didn't fool him. That demigod in front of him didn't know who her mother was. Kind of ironic, because the Lord of the Forest could have sworn that he had the actual goddess in front of him, if it wasn't for her appearance, which was radically different. Even without knowing it, she was reasoning with the principle of balance. Girl, do you know who I am? He asked her. She shook her head. I am Silvos, firstborn of Kronos and Ray, Titan of the wilderness and Lord of the Forest, he announced, making her white in her eyes. The city of Scythia dared to defy my power and attack my kingdom, resulting in the death of innocent creatures and the loss of one of my lovers. Tonight, it will fall. Fear not, Mavola, because no longer you will be the subject of violence. I can give you a gift, but a poisoned one. His expression was dead serious. If you could bring the righteous punishment upon this city at the cost of your humanity, will you accept it? Mavola didn't need to ask twice. I never considered myself to be one, to begin with, she said bitterly. Arsilvos nodded, then waved his hand. Vines and other creepers soon enveloped the princess. Let's proceed, he said. Slowly, cries of terror and agony reached him from outside. His face stretched in a predatory smile. It has begun. Pandemonium. Houses were ablaze, blood flowed down the street, and screams resonated in the air. People still half asleep or drunk ran in every direction, only to be nailed by the dried spears. In the street, a bunch of guards were trying to keep a dozen of lion werecats at bay, but their formation was broken by a big male appearing from behind them, and they were torn off. In a house, a fat man desperately tried to kick off the bear that pinned him to the ground. It was useless, as no more than a second later, his intestines caked the walls. Near a destroyed temple, a pack of Cadmean foxes restlessly attacked soldiers that tried to hold them back. The furious animals' spears sliced and chopped legs, arms, heads in an equal bloodthirst, determined to avenge the loss of their kits. Everywhere, lemures destroyed buildings, as if they were mere sandcastles, rubble squashing peoples that were still trapped under it. Boars, lions, panthers, wolves, and bears killed everything in sight, and sphinxes and griffins disposed of the more troublesome soldiers. Rivers of blood flowed in the streets. Even trees and brambles were slowly creeping through the streets, squeezing to death any living beings in the vicinity, and causing the buildings to collapse. There was nothing but death, cries of anguish, and fire. Yet, the creatures of the forest didn't seem to stop for even 1 second. The proud city of Kogdir was tasting the rightful wrath of their king. Marivit was literally pissing himself. He ran, like a headless chicken, squealing in fright, and screaming at his guards to protect him. The palace was falling apart. He finally exited the palace only to discover the blazing torch that was his city. Before he could go anywhere, a lemur appeared and pinned him to the ground. Squirming in a vain attempt to free himself, Merivit watched as his guards were slaughtered by the howling mass of wild animals and forest creatures that were swarming around him. The pitiful hog of a man was crying in fear, in a weak-willed mind, unable to understand what was happening. Silvos swung his sword, splitting a running human in half. He made his bow appear and shot dozens of humans in a matter of seconds. Blood caked his form, and his eyes were two glowing inferno. No one would escape his wrath. The city will be leveled to the ground, and no remains will be left. He noticed that Borbos had captured the king who was trying to save his sorry ass. He growled and walked straight at him. Next to him, a young girl was holding a woman, before biting her neck. A suction and gulping noise could be heard, as the woman's eyes rolled back in her sockets. In a thud, the corpse of the woman fell to the ground. The girl wiped her bloodied mouth. She had long white hair that was floating in the air, as animated by an unseen wind. Her eyes were pure white, crimson tears-like markings running down her pale cheeks. Fangs pointed out of her rosy lips. "Come," our Silvos told her. "We have a meeting with the great King Merivit." The girl grinned in a sadistic manner. "But of course, my lord." Merivit was shaking under Barbro's grip. He watched as the giant of a man was slowly coming his way. He squirmed even harder in order to escape. Finally, the man stopped in front of him. From his position, Merivit could barely look at him. "Did you really think that your crimes would be unpunished, human?" The man asked. "Did you believe that the afterlife will be kind to you? Hades reserved the worst tortures for you in the field of punishments, worm. But I do not intend to let you leave the living world without a proper punishment. Remember this, insects. Nobody defies the titan of the forest and lives to tell the tale." The man turned to a figure next to him. "Do it." The figure approached and kneeled next to him. She forced him to look at her by forcibly gripping his head. "Good evening, father," greeted a venom-laced voice. Merivit recognized that voice. Her face was different, her entire frame and aura were different, but not the voice. He growled, suddenly feeling braver, or stupider. "So that's your fault. How dare you bring all of those upon us, you stupid whore," Merivit screamed when one of his fingers got bent in the wrong way. "Shut your trap, human. If anything, you brought it to yourself," she hissed, ignoring the pitiful sobs of the fat sack of lard at her feet. "Such a pathetic existence that is yours. You despise anything godly and sacred, and yet, you spawned me, a demigod. It's almost laughable, really," she sneered. "I can't understand what was going on in my immortal mother's head to copulate with such a swine like you. What pushed Medora to marry you, I will never know. But you will pay for her death." Merivit didn't respond, too busy crying over his broken finger. Angered, Mavola kicked the king in the gut. "Stop being so pitiful, maggot," she hissed coldly, before smirking sadistically. "You know, in a way, it's thanks to you that I am what I am now." She gripped his face, immobilizing him. "Should I thank you the proper way?" she whispered almost huskily, baring vampire-like fangs. Merivit could only scream, as he was turned into a pile of bloody flesh and intestines. Mavola, daughter of Nemesis, and first Strigoi, had her revenge. And so fell the proud city of Scythia. End of the tale. Our Silvos sighed deeply. That story was a sore subject to him. "I never knew the backstory of the destruction of Scythia," said Artemis, still overwhelmed by what she had just learned. Her uncle Ars Silvos, the laid-back, easygoing, and kind titan, could also be a ruthless executioner who wiped out cities without remorse. To think that such a caring and loving person could be so. "Does it sound monstrous to you, little one?" Ars Silvos suddenly asked, making the young goddess stiffen, as it was exactly what she was thinking. "Like I said, they deserved this, and frankly, they weren't redeemable. None of them. If anything, I did them a favor before they finally went too far and destroyed themselves, causing more damage," said the Lord of the Forest Whip. "You have to understand, Artie, that humans are complex creatures. Sometimes they act as the vilest monsters, other times they act as the bravest heroes. Human nature is versatile, and us immortals will always have a hard time understanding them, for we are beyond the limits of time and mortality. Humanity must be guided. But the poisonous seeds must be removed one way or another." Artemis thought for a moment. But what if not all of them deserve to be guided? What if some of them are more worthy of being guided than others? Beside the bad seeds. Surely, there must be people who are more righteous of our guidance than others. The Titan looked at her blankly for a moment before responding. "Artie, what is worth saving?" He looked at her right in the eyes, ice blue meeting silver. "The one who would die anyway, but who will be greatly missed, or the one who could live but would lead to the death of the previous one?" Artemis seemed uncertain. "You see," said Ars Silvos. "It may sound easy, the choice is harder in a real situation. We are not supposed to save everybody, that's very true. But not acting for those who could be saved, and that we know we can save, is no better than cowardice. That was why I allowed Mavola to live. She was the only one who could be saved, and the only one I had the power to help." "I do not understand ourselves," said Artemis, frowning. The Titan chuckled softly. "That's not important right now, never mind. Let's catch something, shall we?" It's time to practice moving targets. The young goddess nodded and went to retrieve her quiver. As her uncle watched her leave, he whispered softly to himself. One day you will understand, Artemis. I know you will. Thanks for watching my video, sayonara.